Rain pelted the cracked asphalt of Hollow Ridge, turning the quiet town into a blur of gray shadows. Officer Daniel Mercer's chest tightened as he scanned the edge of the forest where his K-9 partner, Kane, had vanished hours earlier. A faint, crimson smear on the wet leaves caught his eye. Blood. His stomach twisted. Kane wasn't just a partner. He was family. Every instinct screamed that something terrible had happened, yet the forest held its secrets close, whispering only in the wind. Daniel swallowed hard, gripping his flashlight, and stepped into the darkness, unaware that each step would unravel truths he wasn't ready to face. If you're enjoying this story, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps me share more suspenseful journeys like this. The forest seemed alive, breathing with the rain-soaked air that clung to Daniel Mercer's uniform. Each step into the undergrowth was met with the squelch of mud under his boots and the faint rustle of branches. The scent of wet pine and decaying leaves was overpowering, and somewhere beyond the curtain of gray, the occasional call of a crow cut through the storm. Daniel's flashlight bobbed his grip, casting long, trembling shadows across trunks and tangled roots. He kept his voice low, almost a whisper. "Kane, come on, boy," he muttered, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. He knew the dog could track his scent, even in darkness, but there was no bark, no familiar pad slap on the dirt, just the silence of the forest and the blood. The crimson smear he'd seen near the tree line was no longer faint. It led deeper into the woods, glistening under the flashlight's beam. Daniel crouched, running a gloved hand over the slick trail. The drops were large, irregular. Panic lanced through him. Kane was hurt, and every instinct told Daniel he wasn't far. He followed the trail with meticulous care, each step taking him deeper into the remote woods surrounding Hollow Ridge. It was the kind of place locals avoided after sunset. Too many stories about missing hunters, or the old mill that had burned down decades ago, leaving hollow ruins as a playground for shadows. Daniel didn't believe in ghosts, but fear, he realized, was contagious here. It pressed against his chest like a physical weight. A snapping branch echoed behind him, sharp and sudden. Daniel spun, flashlight sweeping the darkness. Nothing, just the rain hammering down in sheets. But his pulse jumped, the prickle of unease crawling down his spine. Kane would never have left without reason. He always came back. Always. The trail led to a narrow creek, swollen from the storm, its water dark and roiling. Here, the blood vanished. Daniel knelt by the muddy bank, searching for any sign. Scratches on the roots, disturbed leaves, a paw print. That's when he noticed it. A fragment of fur, dark and damp, tangled in a bush. His throat tightened, a lump forming that made swallowing nearly impossible. Kane had been here. He had been dragged. "Stay calm," Daniel whispered. "Stay calm, Mercer." The sound of footsteps, not his own, echoed from the other side of the creek. He froze, hand tightening around the flashlight, heart hammering. "Officer Mercer?" A voice called, hesitant, cautious. Daniel squinted through the downpour. A figure emerged, a man middle-aged, wearing a soaked flannel shirt and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was rough, sun-creased, with eyes that didn't quite meet Daniel's. "Name's Tom Ridley," the man said, voice low, almost offensive. Saw the flash of light, and thought maybe someone was hurt. Daniel considered his options. Could he trust this stranger? But the forest felt alive with unseen eyes, and he didn't want to face it alone. "Kane's missing," Daniel said, keeping his tone measured. "You seen anything?" Tom's eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly. "Only the creek and the old mill," he said. If he wandered too far, that's where he might have gone. Daniel's stomach sank. The old mill had been abandoned for years. Hollow, dangerous, and rumored to be a haunt for unsavory types. "I'll check it out," he said, already moving, leaving Tom behind. Tom's voice stopped him for a moment. "Careful, officer. Not all lost things want to be found." Daniel didn't reply. He didn't need to. Words wouldn't save Kane. Only action. The path to the mill was treacherous, slick with rain, roots jutting like teeth waiting to trip him. The wind carried whispers. Was it the storm or the forest itself? And every shadow seemed to shift, pulse, move. Daniel's mind raced through scenarios. Kane trapped, injured, maybe worse. His chest tightened with a mix of dread and guilt. He had been distracted earlier, arguing with the precinct over a missing case file. If he hadn't delayed, maybe Kane wouldn't be in danger. The ruins of the mill came into view, skeletal and soaked, jagged beams jutting at odd angles. Water pooled in the corners, and the remnants of machinery groaned under the weight of the storm. Daniel crouched at the entrance, flashlight cutting through the darkness. And there it was, another smear of blood leading inside. "Kane," he called, voice raw. A low whine answered him. His heart leapt, but fear gripped him. Kane's whine wasn't playful or relieved. It was a sound of pain and warning. He stepped cautiously into the mill, the floorboards slick, rotten. Every creak echoed like a gunshot. His flashlight caught movement, something scuttling across the shadows. Then he saw it, the glint of metal in the corner, half buried in darkness. He approached slowly, senses on fire. There, chained to a rusted post, was a figure. Not Kane, but a man, young, shaking, bruised. Beside him, in a puddle of rainwater and blood, lay Kane, his coat matted, one leg twisted unnaturally. His eyes, wide and trusting, met Daniel's, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that gaze. "Easy, boy," Daniel whispered, kneeling beside him. Kane flinched, whimpering. He tugged gently on the leash, testing the dog's response. Kane leaned into him, eyes closing briefly as if trusting that this human, flawed and human, could fix everything. The boy groaned, stirring slightly. "Help me," he rasped. Daniel's head snapped up. Another soul in danger. He cursed under his breath, checking the chains. The boy's clothes were torn, his face bruised, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Who did this? Daniel demanded, scanning the shadows. The boy shook his head. I don't know. They said if I screamed, his voice faltered, choking on tears. Daniel's fists clenched. Someone had orchestrated this, had lured Kane here, and the thought that the dog had taken the brunt of it. It made anger and despair curl in his stomach like fire. He carefully freed the boy from the chains, wrapping his jacket around him. Kane leaned against Daniel's leg, shivering, broken but alive. Tom's voice echoed from the entrance. "I told you, not all lost things want to be found." Daniel turned sharply. Tom was standing there, rain plastering his shirt to his chest, a strange, calm smile on his lips. It wasn't relief, it was satisfaction. Betrayal rippled in Daniel's chest. Why had Tom not warned him sooner? Why lead him here at all? "You—" Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. "What did you do?" Tom's smile didn't waver. "I didn't do this, Mercer," he said, "but I knew someone who would. And now, you're in it whether you like it or not." Daniel's mind spun, adrenaline sharpening his senses. Someone had set this up, used Kane to lure him, and Tom was more involved than he let on. And the boy had been a pawn, innocent and broken. He glanced at Kane, whose breathing was heavy but steady. He had survived for now, but Daniel knew the storm wasn't over. Not for him, not for the boy, and certainly not for Hollow Ridge. The rain continued to hammer down, masking the distant sound of sirens. Daniel tightened his grip on Kane's leash. He didn't trust Tom, didn't trust anyone, but he had to protect what was left. The forest around them seemed to exhale, a living entity waiting for the next move, the next horror. And Daniel Mercer knew, deep in his bones, that nothing would ever be the same. Daniel Mercer didn't sleep that night. The storm had eased, leaving a misty gray dawn crawling across Hollow Ridge, but his mind was alive with the echo of Kane's whimpers and the boy's trembling voice. They were safe, for now, but the sense of dread that had gripped him in the forest lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. He sat in his car, Kane pressed against his side, the dog's warmth a fragile comfort. The boy, wrapped in a dry blanket, had fallen into a fitful, haunted sleep in the back seat. Every time Daniel glanced at him, he noticed subtle signs of trauma. The way the boy's fingers flexed and clenched, or how his eyes darted to shadows, as if expecting something to leap out. Daniel knew he couldn't stay in Hollow Ridge with the boy. The local authorities would insist on questioning, on placing him in protective custody, but he wanted to keep him close, even for a little while, until he could figure out what had really happened. Kane licked his hand, and Daniel forced a weak smile. They were family, and family didn't give up no matter how impossible the situation seemed. The memories of the mill haunted him. The chains, the blood, the way the boy had looked at him, a mixture of hope and terror. And then Tom Ridley. Daniel still didn't trust him. There was something off about the man, too calm, too measured, as if he'd known more than he let on. And the way Tom had spoken of the lost things felt like a warning or maybe a threat. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through the photos he'd taken in the mill. Each frame told a story. The twisted metal, the puddle of water stained with blood, Cain lying in the mud, the boy's bruised face. His hands trembled slightly. He needed answers. And the only place to start was Tom. He drove through the foggy road to Hollow Ridge, the town silent and damp. Shops were shuttered, the usual morning bustle muted by the storm's aftermath. Tom's house stood at the edge of the forest, a weathered cabin with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Daniel parked a few hundred feet away, stepping out into the damp air. Cain stayed close, his ears perked, tail low but alert. "Tom," Daniel called as he approached the porch. "We need to talk." Tom emerged from the cabin, hands in his pockets, a faint smirk curling his lips. "Mercer, I figured you'd come." Daniel didn't respond. He scanned the yard, noting the scattered tools, the tarps covering who knows what, and the dark windows that seemed to watch him as if alive. He gestured for Cain to stay, and the dog obediently crouched beside a low tree. "You brought the boy here?" Daniel asked, voice low, dangerous. Tom shook his head. "No, he came on his own. But now that you have him, it complicates things." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tom shrugged, almost casual. "Hollow Ridge isn't what it used to be. People here, they have secrets. And some secrets demand payment." Daniel's fists clenched. "Payment for what?" Tom's gaze drifted toward the forest. "Let's just say Cain didn't wander here by accident. Someone wanted to see how far you'd go." Daniel's heart pounded. Someone had orchestrated this entire ordeal, used his K9 to lure him into the forest, and left the boy chained and scared. The pieces didn't fit yet, but the picture was darkening fast. Before he could respond, Cain growled low, his hackles raised. Daniel turned to see a figure moving among the trees. Fast, deliberate. He squinted, and recognition hit him like a bullet. A man lean with a dark hoodie, eyes cold and calculating, watching from the edge of the yard. "That's him," Tom said softly, almost reverently. The one who set it all in motion. Daniel's mind raced. He needed to act fast. "Who is he?" "Name's Silas. Dangerous. Smart. And he's been around here longer than anyone knows." Tom's voice held a strange mix of fear and admiration. "He's the one you should be afraid of, not me." Daniel's pulse spiked. He had heard rumors of Silas, a man with a twisted reputation, disappearing into the woods for days at a time, rumored to have been involved in trafficking and worse. To think he'd entangled Cain in this, it made Daniel's stomach churn. The boy stirred, eyes opening wide and fearful. He looked at Daniel and Cain, then at Tom and the approaching figure. Daniel crouched, voice calm but firm. "You're safe. We're going to get through this." The boy nodded weakly, tears streaking his cheeks. He said he'd come back. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't need to ask who he was. Silas, the orchestrator, the shadow in the woods. The man in the hoodie stepped closer, and Daniel felt a chill. Cain growled, stepping forward, eyes locked on the intruder. Daniel put a hand on the dog's neck, restraining him. The tension was electric, thick as fog. "You've been meddling," Silas said, voice calm but venomous. Cain was a test, the boy an experiment. And now you're here, poking your nose where it doesn't belong. Daniel's voice was steady, though his heart raced. "Leave him out of this. The boy doesn't deserve your games." Silas chuckled, a low, cruel sound. "Games? No, officer. This is survival. And you become a pawn too." Daniel's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him, but he had to stay in control. Cain's eyes were fixed on Silas, ready to strike. The boy pressed closer to Daniel, trembling. "You're not going to win." Daniel said. "Whatever you're planning, I'll stop it." Silas tilted his head, smirk widening. "You think you can stop me? You're just one man. And your precious K9," his eyes flicked to Cain. "He won't survive the night if you don't play my way." Daniel felt a knot in his stomach, anger boiling with fear. He had to protect both of them. Every second counted. And yet, he knew Silas was clever. Too clever. This was a trap, layers deep, and the boy's safety depended on Daniel's next move. Tom stepped forward, surprising Daniel. "I can help," he said, voice low. "I know his patterns, where he hides. But you have to trust me." Daniel's eyes narrowed. Trust Tom? After everything? But he had no other option. He couldn't confront Silas alone. Cain whined softly, sensing the tension, pressing against Daniel's side. "Fine," Daniel said, voice hard. "But if you betray me..." Tom raised his hands. "I won't. I swear." Daniel glanced at the boy, then at Cain. Decision made. They couldn't wait for backup, not with Silas so close, so calculated. The forest was a living trap, and time was slipping through their fingers like water. Together, they moved cautiously toward the deeper woods. Silas retreating, watching, waiting for them to make the first misstep. Every sound, the crunch of leaves, the drip of rain from leaves, Cain's soft panting, was amplified in the tension-filled silence. As they reached a small clearing, Tom stopped, pointing to a shallow ditch partially hidden under fallen branches. "He likes to wait here," Tom whispered. "It's his little game." Testing patience, fear, control. Daniel's fists clenched. "And the boy..." "Keep him close," Tom said. "If Silas senses fear, he'll strike faster." Daniel positioned himself protectively. Cain at his side, the boy pressed against him. The rain had stopped, but the mist hung thick, a gray curtain that concealed danger. The forest seemed to lean in, listening, judging. Then a soft snap of a twig. Cain growled low, tense ready. Daniel's heart leapt. Silas had arrived, unseen until now. He emerged slowly from the shadows, hands raised, a dark grin on his face. "Impressive," Silas said. "You're not just another cop. You care. You fight. But this is bigger than you, Mercer." Daniel squared his shoulders. "We'll see about that." Silas tilted his head, and for the first time, Daniel noticed a faint scar running from his temple down to his jaw, a mark of battles perhaps, or cruelty. The man had lived in darkness for too long, and in that moment, Daniel realized the forest wasn't just a backdrop. It was a weapon, a participant. Every shadow could conceal Silas, every whisper of wind a threat. And yet, for all the danger, Daniel's resolve hardened. Cain was alive. The boy was alive. And he wasn't going to let either of them become another lost thing in Hollow Ridge. The mist thickened. Silas stepped closer, deliberately, taunting, waiting for the first misstep. Cain's growl deepened. The boy clung to Daniel's arm. And Daniel Mercer knew the real test, the one that would push him to the edge, was only just beginning. The mist clung to Hollow Ridge like a shroud. The gray light of dawn filtered through the skeletal branches of the trees. Daniel Mercer's pulse pounded in his ears as he crouched in the undergrowth, Cain's cold muzzle pressed against his shoulder. The boy trembled against him, his small hands gripping Daniel's jacket, like a lifeline. The forest was eerily silent, every shadow heavy with anticipation. Silas had retreated, but Daniel knew it was only temporary. The man was methodical, patient, dangerous. And now, Daniel realized with sinking heart, Silas had set another trap, this one far more personal. The boy had been used as bait once, but Cain, his K9 partner, had been the target all along. Daniel's mind raced through strategies, but there was little time. The faintest trail of blood on the forest floor caught his eye, a single dark smear glistening in the fog. His stomach tightened. Cain limped slightly, dragging one paw. Whoever had attacked him had left a signature, a warning. The K9 was alive, but only just. "Cain," Daniel whispered, voice breaking. "We're going to fix this. I promise." Cain's eyes met his, filled with trust and fatigue. Daniel's chest ached. They had been through so much together. And yet, The fight wasn't over. Tom's voice cut through the fog. He's near the creek. That's where he likes to play with his little toys. The words were casual, but Daniel caught the underlying menace. Silas was waiting for them there. They moved quietly, Daniel's boots sinking into mud, branches whipping across his face. Cain limped but kept pace, his growl low and constant. The boys stayed close, eyes wide and fearful, whispering the occasional question about Cain. Daniel offered no reassurances he didn't feel, only squeezed the boy's hand and pressed forward. The creek came into view, dark water churning over rocks. And there, partially hidden behind a fallen log, was Silas. His figure was calm, collected, almost casual, but the gleam in his eyes spoke of cruelty. Beside him, chained to a tree, was another figure, Cain, bloodied and panting but alive. "Stop," Silas said, his voice unervingly calm. One wrong move, and his hand gestured toward the chains, and Daniel's stomach twisted. Daniel stepped forward slowly, trying to gauge Silas's intentions. "Let him go, Silas. You don't have to do this." Silas laughed softly, the sound cold and cutting through the forest. "You don't get it, Mercer. This is more than just Cain. This is about control, about watching someone you care about suffer, and seeing if they're willing to pay the price to save them." Daniel's heart pounded. The boy whimpered, pressing closer. Cain growled, teeth bared, but didn't move. The tension was unbearable. Tom stepped forward. "You can't win like this," he said, voice calm. "You're not facing just Mercer. You're facing the town, the forest, everything that protects him." Silas turned toward Tom, eyes narrowing. "And you think you're helping? You're as much a part of this as I am. Don't forget that." Daniel froze. Betrayal. Tom's calm guidance, his knowledge of Silas's patterns, it had all been leading to this moment. But then he noticed a flicker in Tom's eyes, hesitation, something almost human. Perhaps he hadn't been entirely complicit. "Step back," Daniel commanded, voice ironclad, "or I swear I'll." A sudden movement startled them all. Cain lunged forward, snapping at the chains, the sound of metal straining against rust echoing through the trees. Silas cursed, stepping back, pulling his own weapon, a hunting knife glinting in the mist. Daniel's mind raced. There was no time for subtlety. He grabbed a large branch, swinging it with all his strength at Silas. The man dodged, but Daniel noticed a slight smirk falter. Cain barked, yanking at his chains, finally breaking free with a grunt that echoed like a release of pent-up fury. The boy screamed, and Daniel spun to pull him behind a tree. The forest became a blur of motion, rain-dampened leaves flying, mud spraying as Cain and Daniel confronted Silas. A struggle erupted, violent, raw, chaotic. Cain bit at Silas's arm, growling through labored breaths, while Daniel wrestled him to the ground. The man was strong, but adrenaline and desperation gave Daniel the edge. Finally, with a surge of strength and Cain's assistance, Silas was pinned, gasping, knife clattering to the mud. Daniel knelt, chest heaving, gripping Silas's collar. "It's over," he said, voice shaking. "No more games." Silas's eyes were wild, almost admiring. You did it. You actually cared enough to fight for them." His lips twisted in a bitter smile. "Not many would." Daniel glanced at Cain, who sat panting beside him, bloodied but alive, and then at the boy, trembling but unharmed. The sight made something inside him break and rebuild all at once, a fragile, bittersweet relief. But as he turned back to Silas, a sudden movement caught his eye. Tom, standing silently, holding a pistol now aimed at Silas. His hand shook slightly. I couldn't let him escape," Tom admitted. "Not after what he did to my sister. I had to make sure he paid." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Your sister?" Tom's eyes glistened. He took her years ago. Hollow Ridge never spoke of it, but I swore I'd see justice done. I thought I could guide you, Mercer, but I underestimated the danger. Betrayal, revenge, and grief twisted the scene into something darker than Daniel had imagined. Yet beneath it all, he saw the shards of humanity in Tom, the pain that had driven him to extremes. He sighed, lowering his weapon. "We'll deal with him together. No more secrets. Tom, No more games. Silas, breathing heavily, smirked faintly. You think this is the end? Hollow Ridge, it never ends. Daniel didn't respond. He was too busy gathering Cain and the boy, checking injuries, and processing the layers of betrayal, vengeance, and survival that had unfolded. The ambulance sirens came first as a distant wail, cutting through the mist. Hollow Ridge authorities would handle Silas now, and Cain and the boy would be safe. Yet Daniel's mind lingered on the scars left behind, the physical, the emotional, the moral. He knelt beside Cain, stroking his muzzle. "You're a hero, boy," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Cain leaned into him, eyes softening, as if understanding every word. The forest seemed quieter now, but Daniel knew the echoes of what happened would linger forever. The boy, finally calm, looked up at Daniel. "Will he come back?" he asked, voice small, almost fragile. Daniel shook his head gently. "No, but we'll be okay. You're safe now. Cain's safe. And we'll make sure nothing like this happens again." The three of them, man, boy, and dog, stood together in the clearing. Rain still dripped from leaves, the mist swirling around their feet. The sun, faint and hesitant, broke through the fog, casting soft light over the scene. It wasn't victory. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Enough to breathe, to heal, to begin again. Daniel knew Hollow Ridge would remember this day. The storm, the blood, the courage of man and his K9 who refused to abandon the innocent. And as he lifted Cain into his arms and the boy clung to him, he understood that some bonds were unbreakable, forged in fear, pain, and unwavering loyalty. And in that quiet, mist-draped forest, Daniel Mercer allowed himself a small, bittersweet smile. For all the darkness they had endured, for all the betrayals and horrors, they had survived. Cain was alive. The boy was alive. And somehow, against the cruelest odds, justice had its fragile victory. The forest whispered behind them, but Daniel didn't flinch. Not anymore. He was home,